In this story, a simple lie unravels 10 years of marriage, and a family faces a truth they never saw coming. I always assumed that my relationship with Lisa was secure. We had been married for 10 years, had 2 wonderful children, and lived in a nice neighborhood. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. But lately, something felt strange, and at first, I couldn't figure it out. It started with little things, like Lisa using her phone more frequently and smiling at texts that she never shared with me, and going out more and claiming to be meeting up with her sister Kelly. At first, I didn't think much of it because Lisa and Kelly were close. Made sense, but then it became a regular occurrence every weekend, sometimes even during the week, when I was left with the kids while she went to visit her sister. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, I noticed Lisa packing an overnight bag. "You're staying with Kelly again?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, she's going through some stuff and needs me around," she said, without looking at me, packing clothes into the bag. I nodded, but there was something about her tone that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that we'd always trusted each other, but that trust was beginning to erode. One night after she left, I decided to call Kelly to check in. I'd never done that before, but I needed to calm myself. After a few rings, Kelly answered, sounding surprised to hear from me. "Hey, everything's fine, just wanted to see how you're doing." "Yes, everything's fine, just wanted to see how you're doing," she said. "Lila's been spending a lot of time with you lately, so I figured I'd check in." Pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I'm fine. Lisa is here a lot, but we haven't been doing much other than hanging out." Her tone seemed strange, as if she was trying to hide something, but I didn't push it. "Let me know if you need anything, sure," she said quickly before hanging up. But that conversation didn't sit well with me. Kelly wasn't the type to lie, but she didn't seem comfortable talking to me, so I began to question whether Lisa was actually with her at all. The next time Lisa said she was going to Kelly's, she pulled into a driveway in a neighborhood I didn't recognize, so I parked down the street and watched as she got out of the car. A man came out of the house to greet her, and they hugged longer than friends should have. I felt like a complete jerk for doing it, but I had to know. I waited until she was a few blocks away before getting my keys and leaving, keeping my distance and driving slowly so she wouldn't notice me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I wanted to storm up and demand an explanation, but I refrained because I wanted to make sure I had evidence before confronting her. Instead, I sat in my car, heart pounding, watching as they went inside. After a few minutes, I got out and walked up to the house, where bushes near the windows provided some cover. I squatted down and looked inside, my stomach churning with anxiety. I could see them in the living rooms, sitting close to each other on the couch, laughing and talking. The way she looked at him, when she touched his arm, I knew she was cheating on me. I remained frozen there for what seemed like hours, watching them without being able to hear what they were saying. But I didn't need to because the expression on her face told me she was happier with him than she had been with me in months. Eventually, they got up and went upstairs, and I didn't need to see them anymore because I felt like my world had just fallen apart. I staggered back to my car and drove home in a daze, not even sure how I made it home, and placed the kids too. My mind was racing as I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, trying to figure out what to do next. I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't want to do it without proof. I needed to catch them in the ACT to have something she couldn't deny. However, I also knew that once I did, there would be no turning back. Our marriage would be over, and our children would be caught in the middle. I didn't want that, but I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. I couldn't act like nothing had happened. The following day, I went about my usual activities as if nothing had happened. I tried to act normal, took the kids to school, went to work, and couldn't stop thinking about Lisa and that man. I started following her more frequently, each time feeling worse than the last, and I would watch them through the windows, taking pictures with my phone to document everything. It felt wrong, but I needed proof, something to confront her about, something she couldn't convince herself she was having. I knew the confrontation was coming, and I dreaded it, but I also knew it was inevitable that our lives were about to change forever, and there was no stopping it. The more I followed Lisa, the more the reality of the situation set in. I had always thought we were strong, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet because I was afraid of what would happen and how our lives would change once the truth was out. I was furious, but also heartbroken, because seeing her with him, laughing, touching, and sneaking around behind my back tore that belief to shreds. After a few weeks of torturing myself, I knew I couldn't continue living this way. The pictures I had seen were enough, and now it was time to face her. I wasn't sure how she would respond, but I needed to hear it from her to make her take responsibility for what she was doing. I needed closure, that I sat on the couch waiting for her to come home on Friday night after the kids had gone to bed. She had told me she was going to Kelly's again, but I knew exactly where she was. I stared at the clock, and every minute passed without me flinching. At midnight, my heart began to race, and I clenched my fists, trying to remain calm. The front door creaked open, and she entered, grinning as if nothing had happened. "Hey, you're up late," she said, kicking off her shoes. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep," I replied. "We need to talk." So I tried to speak steadily, but something in my tone must have given it away because she looked nervous and asked, crossing her arms. I got up and turned to face her, taking a deep breath, and I said quietly, "I know you're not going to Kelly's." Her face turned pale, and she began to shake her head. "What are you talking about? I've been with Kelly." "Don't lie to me, Lisa," I interrupted myself. Rising, "I followed you, knowing you've been seeing someone. Otherwise, I've seen you with him everything." She froze, her mouth hanging open, and she just stared at me as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then, she shook her head more forcefully, saying, "No, you're getting it all wrong. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what you think." I felt a wave of rage, and I pulled out my phone, opened the gallery, and shoved the pictures in her face. I said, "How do you do this, Lisa?" As she looked at the pictures, her face collapsing as she recognized that there was no escape. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks, even though I knew the truth. Hearing her admit it made it all real, and my legs felt like they were going to give out, forcing me to sit back down on the couch. I watched as tears filled her eyes, and she covered her mouth with her hand, looking as though she was going to get sick. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "How long have you been seeing him?" I asked in a trembling voice, and she didn't answer at first. Instead, she just stood there sobbing silently, and I could see the guilt and shame on her face. When I demanded a louder response, she finally admitted, her voice cracking, that it had been 6 months, half a year, of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, and I couldn't comprehend how she had managed to hide it for so long. How had I been blind? And why I said, my voice breaking, "Why would you do this to us, our family?" She turned away, unable to look me in the eyes, and said, "I didn't mean for it to happen." She said, "I was just so unhappy, and he made me feel special." I know it's no excuse, but that's the truth. And I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words only made me angrier. "So you decided to end our marriage for a guy who made you feel special? We could have talked, Lisa." I know she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. This was the woman I had built my life with, the mother of my children, and now everything we had was falling apart. "What are we supposed to do?" I asked hollow. "What do we tell the kids? How do we explain this to them?" She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. "I don't know." We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us too devastated to say anything else, my mind racing with all the things I had to say. I was selfish, stupid, and I knew I ruined everything. Eventually, I broke the silence and told her to leave because the things we would have to deal with, divorce, custody, the impact this would have on our children, were too much for me to handle. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock, and I said, "You can't stay here after this, but I'll take care of the kids." I said firmly, "You're the one who messed up. You're the one who has to deal with the consequences." She began to cry, again, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her, because I was too. She pleaded, "Please, Let me stay so I can start to heal. I need her out of the house and out of my life so I can start to heal. I'll sleep on the couch and do whatever you want. Just don't make me leave. I want to be here for the kids." I shook my head. "You made your choice, Lisa. You chose him over us. Now you have to live with that." She just nodded slowly and defeatedly, then got up and walked to our bedroom, her steps heavy with the weight of what she had done. A few minutes later, I heard her packing a bag. The days after Lisa left were some of the hardest I've ever experienced. I had to keep it together for the kids, but every time they inquired about it, I sat there for hours after she left, staring at nothing, trying to process everything that had just happened. My world was shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. She came back downstairs, saying, "I'm so sorry," one last time before leaving. When I told them that their mother was staying somewhere else for a while because we needed some space, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I didn't know how to tell them the truth without breaking their hearts, so I kept it simple at first. Soon after, they began asking more difficult questions like, "When is Mom coming back?" and "Why did she leave?" I could see the hurt and confusion in their eyes, and it killed me that I didn't have the answers they wanted, and I didn't want to lie to them either. I took a deep breath to steady my voice as the 8-year-old looked at me gravely and asked, "Dad, is this our fault? Did we do something to make Mom leave?" His voice was shaking. I was unsure of what to say because I didn't want to place the burden of our problems on their young shoulders, but I also knew that being too evasive would only confuse them. "No, Jake, none of this is your fault. You and your sister did nothing wrong. This is between your mom and me. It has nothing to do with you. But why won't she come home?" I started cautiously because sometimes adults make mistakes, and when that happens, it can be difficult to make things right. However, I want you to know that your mother loves you both very much and that no matter what happens between us, it will never change. They seemed to accept that, but I could tell they were still hurting, and I was hurting too. But I had to be strong for them, even though I felt like I was barely hanging on. In the weeks that followed, I concentrated on giving the kids a sense of normalcy and threw myself into being a dad. We went to the park, had movie nights, and I even tried baking cookies with them. It didn't work out, but the effort was important, and gradually the routine began to help Lisa. I couldn't keep the kids from her forever, so even though I detested the thought of seeing her again, I knew it was crucial for them. So we set up a few times a week for her to pick them up from school, and I made sure to leave the house when she did. After she dropped them off, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the picture of our family that was hanging on the wall. It was taken last Christmas, and we all looked so happy and complete. But now that picture felt like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I had been trying so hard to keep it together for the kids that I hadn't allowed myself to really feel the weight of the betrayal. But sitting there alone felt like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I had loved Lisa with all of my heart, and she had thrown it all away for a brief affair. The grief was overwhelming, but as the days progressed into weeks, I began to see a way forward. I knew that clinging to the anger would only keep me stuck in the past, and I had to let go, not for her sake, but for mine and the kids, who needed a father who could be there and help them move on and start a new life. It wasn't easy, and some days were better than others, but I missed the idea of our family and the future I had imagined with Lisa. I knew that future was gone, and holding on to it would only make things worse. So I started planning for the future without her. I contacted a lawyer to begin the divorce process, something I had been putting off because it felt so final, but it was necessary. We worked out the custody arrangements, giving Lisa joint custody of the kids on the weekends and me custody of the kids during the week. It wasn't what I had envisioned for my family, but it was the best I could do for the time being was to have one last conversation with Lisa before we signed the divorce papers. It was short and mostly about logistics, and she apologized, again, but I didn't want to hear it. I told her that we needed to make sure the kids knew they were loved regardless of what had happened between us, and she agreed. As we said our goodbyes, I felt a strange sense of relief that the chapter with Lisa was over, and even though it was painful, It meant I could start a new one in the months that followed. Rebuilding my life, I threw myself into my work, finding comfort in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it provided. I also spent as much time as possible with the children, creating new memories with them that were unshadowed by the past. I also began going to therapy, something I had never thought about before because it was helpful to talk to someone who wasn't involved, someone who could help me sort through the jumble of emotions I was feeling. Slowly, I began to heal. The pain didn't go away, but it became more tolerable. I was not prepared for anything serious, but it felt good to know that there was life after Lisa. One day, while playing catch with the kids in the backyard, I realized that we were going to be okay. We had been through hell, but we were coming out on the other side. We were still a family, even if it wasn't the one I had imagined. And that was enough. The divorce didn't break us. It felt like I could finally breathe again when I could see a future where what had happened wasn't defined by what had happened. I started going out more, meeting new people, and even went on a few dates. Although Lisa's betrayal had destroyed the life we had built together, I was still standing and moving forward, and that was all that mattered as I watched my kids laugh and play. Life wasn't perfect, but it was still good, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move on. It hurt, but it didn't define me. I still had my kids' jobs and an open future. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. It really means a lot.